folks. My name is Chris Romeo. I'm the CEO of Davici, and welcome to our webinar here. It's called Unlocking the Power of Threat Modeling for Secure and Private Design. And as always, I'm super excited to be joined by Dr. Kim Vutz. Kim, I think it'd be great if you just gave just a quick bio, just to help people that maybe haven't met you before, haven't heard you speak. I know you've spoken a lot of big stages now at RSA and Global OWASP Keynote and a lot of other things. But just in case folks don't know who you are, give us a quick bio.
Yeah, sure. I am currently manager cyber and privacy at PwC in Belgium. And before that, for a long time, I was a researcher in academia in Belgium at KU Leuven. And there I mainly focused on threat modeling for privacy, also developed the Linden privacy threat modeling approach. So yeah, this topic today is kind of my two passions combined, privacy engineering and threat modeling. So I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and I have lots of questions about privacy engineering too. So I'm still reading books and trying to figure this out as I go forward. So maybe I'll ask some of those questions.
So am I, yeah.
So I guess the kind of the focus of what we wanted to do with our time here in this webinar is we wanted to explore secure by design and private by design. And then also, how does threat modeling fit together with these two things? There's a lot of attention being paid to secure by design right now because of all the work that CISA has been doing and their secure by design alerts and their secure by design document and their pledge that people are signing that are swearing they're going to do secure by design forever or something like that. Think about.
Okay, there was some. Okay, I think you need to repeat the last part because there was some glitch there.
A little blip. Oh yeah, a little blip. Yeah. So we're just going to talk about secure by design, how you apply these things, and kind of how they all come together. But I think a good place to start though is what is secure by design? What's private by design? So Kim, I'd love to get your perspective on both of those things.
Okay. I think the essence is basically the same for both. Well, just from different perspectives, but the by design part to me means that you integrate security or privacy early on, ideation phase, design phase, and then it's the shift left thing, and then take it all through the entire development lifecycle. I think you can explain more about security by design than I can. Because, well, I've watched the Security Table podcast. You've covered it a couple of times already. I can give some background on privacy by design. It was a term that was introduced in the mid-90s by Anke Vukian, privacy commissioner in Canada, Ontario, I think. So it's been around for quite some time already. She also laid out some foundational principles. Well, one of them is obviously integrated, embedded early on in the development lifecycle. But well, it's also about having users, individuals being in control, having some transparency there, doing the privacy by default thing, which is maybe a bit different than security by default. The privacy by default was mainly about having that default setting to the most privacy friendly part. So if you imagine, think about Facebook or whatever, where you, in the old days, when you made a post, it would be by default public. And that's not privacy by default. It should be by default only with your friends. So that's the by default thing. And then it kind of evolved, and the concept of privacy by design, well, actually data protection by design, has even been included now in the GDPR and in other privacy or data protection legislations. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's good. Thank you for setting that stage for us here. And you mentioned security table. Speaking of the security table, happy to add Matt Coles into our conversation here. He literally saw the security table bat signal in the sky, and he came rushing into the conversation. Matt, I think you probably just heard us talking about defining secure by design, privacy by design, and Kim focused us in on privacy by design. Um, Matt has a funny voice, but that's okay. It's life. We live it. We live and we work at home. This is our lives, how we go. But Matt, from your perspective, how about tee up secure by design? I know we've talked about it a lot on Security Table, but for those that maybe haven't heard our ramblings in that event, give us your take on it.
Yeah, so secure by design is I mean, hopefully it's similar to what Kim was talking about with privacy by design, but secure by design is basically making sure that you bake in and you design your system from the beginning to have basic security properties, right? So whether that's defense in depth or fail secure or secure communications and making sure that your data is protected, having your basic defense in depth practices as part of the system from day one and not something you bolt on later. You certainly can add to it, but with a secure by design approach, you want to start from a position of security.
So Kim, you mentioned starting early in the process as well. I think you both talked about the importance of that. I guess let's flip it around and look at the other side of the table here. What happens if we don't, starting with privacy, what happens if we don't think about privacy from the very beginning? What are the downstream kind of ramifications for system gets to production? What are the challenges from a privacy side?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, I forgot to mention one of the foundational principles, which is kind of the answer to this question. So perfect. One of the things there is also that we should aim for a positive sum approach, meaning that it's not just an add-on and it's not something that will conflict functionality or security or something. It should be, it should strengthen each other, privacy and the rest of the things that make the system. But if you bolt on privacy later on, if you have your system ready and then you decide, well, now we want to do this in an anonymous way, well, it's going to break the system, basically. You have to either be very creative or change some parts of the system. So that's why it makes sense to do it early on. Same for security. I mean, it's not a new concept that you cannot just sprinkle it on later on. There's no magical solution that you can plug in and play. You need to really embed that in the design to do it properly and to have that most ideal combination of security, privacy, safety, functionality, all of those.
So then what's the rework perspective from a privacy engineering side? I feel like we talk about security all the time, and Matt, I'm going to come to you to talk about the security side. But I didn't mean for this to be security versus privacy either. That wasn't my intention. But Kim, from your perspective and what you've seen, how much rework, how much extra things we have to do if we try to bolt privacy on? Because I don't think I've ever heard anybody answer this question. So this is not for the audience. This is for me. I want to know.
Okay. Well, first of all, Matt knows so much about privacy too, so you shouldn't just ask him the security questions. But yeah, so what changes? I'm going to have to give the consultancy answer. It depends. No, but I think one of the core concepts for privacy is minimization or minimality. So what changes, hopefully early on, is that you think about, do I really need all this data? Maybe I shouldn't be collecting everything. And if I need to collect everything, maybe I shouldn't process everything. And if I do need to process everything, then maybe after processing, it's sufficient to just store the aggregated version or delete some of the stuff that I processed and just keep the summary, so that you already when you create the processes, already think about how can I reduce the privacy risk, which, by the way, also has a positive effect on security, because the less information you have, the less you can lose. Yeah, so that's already one of those things. And of course you can, because people often think like privacy, we have pets, privacy enhancing technologies. So again, it's going to be the solutions that we implement. We do some de-identification stuff, differential privacy. I mean, there's plenty of words you can use there. But to me, that's just like the backup plan. That's when you have gone through the design strategies, principles, and you've done everything like minimization, separating data, as in maybe already processing some stuff on the phone before, and then only sharing the aggregated stuff. So that's definitely, I think, something that is different compared to security.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
I think
Matt,
that there's
from
if I may, just Chris,
yeah, please.
so I think what you're highlighting, and it's consistent, I think, with security as well, is you need to look at this systemically, right? One of the big things that it goes to the rework question as well, is you really need to be looking at your system and understanding all of its pieces, all of its moving parts, where the data is, not just what the data is, but where the data is coming in, where it's going, how it's being passed around within the environment, within the system. And so if you don't think about it holistically, if you don't think about it comprehensively, then you're going to end up with piecemeal solutions or part solutions, right? And so rework for security, I mean, if we look at some basic design principles, that often end up being patched or reworked over time, especially if you have older systems, right? Insecure communications, you can always add security on the communications channel, but realistically, or more practical, sorry, not practically, you really want to look at this more comprehensively and have a consistent solution across the board, so that you're not answering the question, well, what about this? Well, what about that? But in many cases, and especially for the privacy cases that Kim was talking about, those require a holistic solution, right? They can't be done piecemeal, because data collection and data processing and data aggregation is not something you can bolt a fix onto. Not really, right?
That was going to be my next
And
question about that particular angle, right? It seems like with security, we prescribe that people do these measures early, but if they don't, there's still a pathway to success. But it seems like with privacy, if I don't do those things up front, and I just let data go wherever it goes and be processed wherever it is, it's hard to walk that back at a later time, because it's once the data is out there, it's out there. You can't say, well, now we're going to implement private by design. Well, the data has already been pretty much considered public now as a weakness of your system, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to maintain that, you should have a plan up front that you know how to manage that, how to, I don't know, even do data tagging or whatever, or some kind of way to keep track of all the data. You can still do that at a later stage, but then you will need to reprocess all the data you already have and figure out how to do that or redo that in a privacy friendly way. And as you said, Chris, then basically for a while there, you have been doing it in a privacy violating way. So yeah.
And by the way, and just going back to the systemic discussion, right? So Chris, you're right that for security, we can often bolt on or rework and patch, pieces here and there, but we know that is significantly error prone, right? Fixing cross-site scripting issues or buffer overflows is a great example, right? You can patch what people report to you or what you identify from vulnerability scans or other things, but if you're not doing it in a systemic fashion, you're going to miss stuff, right? There will be those interfaces that you don't catch, that somebody doesn't immediately discover, or some that that chooses to remain undiscovered or remain unreported. And so, unless you're doing it systemically, it's error prone, and so it's really important to consider it that way.
Yeah.
I just want to address. I did see a question in the chat about from Leandro about earlier when I was talking about secure by design. I did not mention threat modeling. I did not mention threat modeling by design. So it is not a it is not a threat model. It is not a design principle. It is certainly a tool that we use, but it's not itself a design principle around secure by design. There are other
Well,
ways
that
to
leads
do secure by
us
design, but go ahead.
that
Yeah,
leads
sorry,
us
Chris.
into our next question, though. Like it was a natural flow. You kind of led us right down the path here because we certainly, all three of us, spend a lot of time thinking about threat modeling, and we have for the last number of decades. And so when we think about threat modeling, what is the role of threat modeling in secure by design and private by design? Matt, why don't you go ahead and take this one first because it got teed up for you multiple places.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, threat modeling is, and especially if you do it early and doing secure by design and privacy by design, doing that early, doing that comprehensively, understanding the system as it's being designed, and ideally addressing the gaps before the design goes into production. Threat modeling is a perfect activity for that. It is a early activity. It does not require code. It needs a design that is being it needs a design that is far enough along that you can analyze it for threats and that you can look at those and look at the design and identify, do you have any insecurity or I don't know what the non-private, I guess, insecure or non-private behaviors or system constructs. And you can do that early. You can also do that collaboratively, right? It's not like a code scanning tool that you let the tool run and it spits out results, although there are methods for that. But by and large, the activity is something you can do early. It's something you can do consistently. It's something you can do, and that it helps with looking at comprehensively and systemically your system and your architecture. And so threat modeling is great for that. Again, there are other ways to do this, but they're later in the process, right? So you could do code analysis, you could do security scanning, you could do pen testing, but all of those you've already missed the boat on the architecture, and now you're going to talk about rework or patching or piecemeal modifications. And as we just described around the privacy side, that may be re-architecting entirely how you do data collection, what notices you present to your users. I mean, there's a host of things that you've missed a window on. It's less efficient and therefore we know more costly if you don't do it sooner.
Yeah. Kim, what do you think? How do you see threat modeling and secure by design and private by design interact in your world?
Yeah, it's what Matt said. And I actually think I'm gonna quote you on this, Chris. I think you once said like it's the vehicle that will guide us through secured by design or privacy by design. Because it's really the tool that will give you guidance, will help you analyze the system. And those steps, I mean, I've been trying to talk about security by design or privacy by design in a different way, but it always comes down to, okay, I want to analyze the system, so I need to understand the system. I need to see what can go wrong, and then I can fix it. So those essential steps of threat modeling, I mean, you don't call it threat modeling, but the essential building blocks you will always need, I think. And yeah, Matt, you touched upon the later stages like pen testing. I think in some of the standards, it's also mentioned that you can use the outcome of threat modeling, for instance, as input for what you should look for when you do pen testing. So that result that comes from your threat model will kind of ripple through the different phases too. So yeah.
So
threat modeling is
secure by
awesome.
design.
Yeah.
I knew you were a fan already before we even started talking, though. But it really is a full life cycle solution for starting secure by design, private by design in the beginning, all the way to your example of red team pen testing. And red teamers and pen testers are some of the best threat modelers out there because they have to think about what they're going to do before they go invest the time building a solution or a scenario or something. They have to go through and consider what their options are before they decide to invest in a couple different options that they think are the highest profile. So yeah, I think that's it's fun to hear you explain how there is that full life cycle there.
Actually, Chris, if I may,
please.
it actually goes beyond that. It actually goes back if you think about life cycle as being a circle or as a loop, right? As we like to talk about development as a loop, threat modeling comes in even on the other side, right? As soon as you know you have some issue to fix or you're adding a new feature, right? Threat modeling is an activity that you can drop in at the time you need it. As you're thinking about that new feature, you're thinking about that rework, as you're thinking about that bug fix or that enhancement, you know, you can take especially if you have an original threat model, you can take and now build your new one and predict what's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's part of if you look at it as part of the design process or the engineering process, right? When you're doing engineering processes, you're going to do design, you're going to do concept and design analysis, and you're going to do some sort of prediction or simulation, and you're going to want to do all this prototyping and concept development, whatnot. Well, threat modeling is an activity that fits nicely in that process, whether it's new or you're coming back
Mm-hmm.
around for the second time or the third time or the nth time.
So what you're saying is my LinkedIn tagline is right. Threat modeling is life, is what you just described. I got it
Of
from
an engineer, yeah, absolutely.
I got it
Yeah.
from Ted Lasso. If you ever saw Ted Lasso, there's a character on Ted Lasso that says football is life. It's his kind of his life mantra, I guess. And so I just took it, said threat modeling is life. But in your example, you're talking about using threat modeling at various stages and various points around that circle, which I think
Yep.
does have a lot of value there. When you reach that cultural type of impact, that's where things start to get really fun as a security team, because the team is bringing things to you and you're like, whoa, hey, cool, good one. I would have thought of that. I never thought of it. I want to remind our audience that we are taking questions through the LinkedIn comment process. So if you got a question or comment or something, please type it in and we'll react to it in real time as we see it come by. We'd love to interact with your thoughts on these topics too as we go forward. So let's talk about some common challenges then. And also we can't just give threats, we have to give threats and mitigations, because that's our philosophy. We can't just give you what's broken, we have to tell you how to fix it. So when we think about some of the common obstacles, let's talk in general about secure by design. Let's start by, and so I want to get both of your thoughts on this. So I'm not declaring one secure, one private. Like we're both of your thoughts on each of these things. But when you think about like, what are some of the common obstacles to, let's start with secure by design. And Matt, I'll come to you first, give Kim more time to think about it. But when you think about obstacles to organizational advancement of secure by design, what are some of those blockers? Just start with what some of the blockers are.
Of secure by design, not of
secure by design.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, so I think the biggest blockers I can think of that I've seen, I guess, over the years and in talking to folks is in part a lack of a lack of understanding. So secure design principles, are not always obvious, right? So defense in depth as a property, least privilege as a property. Fail secure and these other practices, properties of a system that we, security professionals, this is our bread and butter. But it's not always obvious, why wouldn't you want to run everything as root? Right now, that's changing, but those are some of that I think is a common barrier to secure by design. So lack of understanding or lack of experience as to why that's important and how to prioritize it. And actually, maybe that's the other piece. The other, number two, is lack of ability or inability to properly prioritize it. So which is more important, least privilege or a feature, right? And so secure by design, and I would just as an aside, since we're going to talk about mitigations, when you build a feature, it should have security properties. Therefore, least privilege and defense in depth, et cetera, should be part of your feature design, right? Should be part of your feature discussion. So there are those, and then of course there's the iron triangle, right? That time, resources, and feature and capability, right? How much time and effort does it take to build in least privilege? Well, if it's cheap and easy for your, if it's cheap in terms of time for your developers to run everything as root and not worry about privilege management and worrying about, you know, what SE Linux properties do I want to set on my containers, and, you know, et cetera, then sure. And that becomes a barrier to you know, building in some basic security properties that they'll have to patch later, right? So you either take it now or you take it later, right? So I think that there's lack of understanding, some lack of experience, and then the inability to properly prioritize that within the development process.
Yeah, and let me get Kim's take on this, and then we'll talk about potential mitigations, because I have one that I want to throw on the table that I think might wrap all of these things together into one overall mitigation. But Kim, what are your thoughts on obstacles, challenges when we're specifically talking about secure by design?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take maybe a bit more of a abstract version of what Matt has sort of said. I think one of the main blockers for security by design is the fact that it's considered a blocker. The fact that it's well, yeah,
How meta, very
yeah,
meta of you.
yes. Thank you. Yeah, the fact that it's being considered as something that is taking too much time, too much effort, slowing down the process. So why bother? We will fix it when the issue occurs.
Yeah, I think that's a solid summary, though, of, like, you kind of bubbled it all up to the one issue that, because we are guilty of that. We are guilty of, and maybe we as security people are even guilty of portraying that, you know, putting it out in front of there. So I'm going to talk about one mitigation, and then there's a couple of questions that have popped in here that look juicy that I want to dig into. But let's talk about mitigation. So what are your thoughts on paved road or paved roads as the overall solution? And I'll set the stage just for, in case people haven't heard this term before. Paved road being this idea that security and privacy teams can build components that are easy for developers to include into a solution that they're building, and things like access control, authentication, things we don't want people rebuilding over and over again. They should be able to take something off the shelf, plug it in, and push the easy button and have it start working for them. So paved roads, are they the solution, Matt, to the things that you were just describing here? How would you see those paved roads interacting with your list of potential obstacles?
Paved roads and guardrails, I think they are certainly a necessary building block. So they're a necessary building block to, if you have a component that's been pre-vetted to have certain properties or certain capabilities, or that has been designed specifically to work in a particular environment, and a developer can take that and makes it easier. It's an easy path to implementation, and you get the sort of a checkbox. You want to be careful, like it doesn't eliminate the need for other work, but it does eliminate the bulk of the core of that problem, right? It's take the solution that we already know meets the security and potentially privacy properties that we're looking for, and integrate it. Otherwise, do X, Y, Z, blah 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 blah, blah down the list, right? And so I think it's critically important that organizations can provide something like that to their development teams, especially if they have a well-known architecture base, or they have a technology base that they're familiar with. And one of the, just sort of as an aside, one of the early things that we talk about from a security, like day one or security 101, is don't build your own crypto, right? We want people to use well-vetted, validated crypto algorithms and implementations of those algorithms. But what we fail to bring into that, and what paved roads, these pre-vetted and predefined components does, is it brings in not just the validated crypto algorithms, but also the wrapper and the way that those are integrated into a system in a way that is hard to get wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a missing piece, right? It's great to have a well-vetted implementation of AES, but if you don't have one that also manages the keys that go with it, or does properly memory management or other things that the developer has to think about when they integrate that AES algorithm, then there's a lot to go wrong, and there's lots then where vulnerabilities come from. Paved roads help to bound that conversation.
Kim, is this a concept that's floating around privacy engineering these days? Of are paved roads and guardrails things that people are thinking about now? Is it something that's brand new? Like, where is it on the spectrum?
Well, maybe I haven't found those resources yet, but I'm not sure whether privacy is there yet. I think privacy is still a bit less mature than security, and is still struggling with getting the other solutions already usable. Yeah. So I think. Well, let me. Quote, well, first of all, let's quote one of our other threat modeling friends, Avi, who said security at the expense of usability is at the expense of security, which also applies to privacy. So I think it goes beyond the paved roads and the guardrails. It also applies to, as you said, Matt, to the solutions, the crypto libraries, but also to the way we can do threat modeling and the tools that support us there, that guide us, that make it easier to link that back to developers. So I think it's the whole process, the whole privacy engineering, security engineering process, all the different steps that could use as much usability as we can. Though I can only speak for myself as a privacy engineer, but I guess most security engineers have the same thing. Let's focus on making it as secure or privacy respecting as we can. And then maybe let's see if it makes sense for the developers or for whomever we're giving that requirement to, while actually one of the priorities should be, let's make sure it's workable. So that reasonable aspect, Chris, that you talk about often, I think that makes a lot of sense, and finding that balance between making it reasonable and usable, I think that's the two key terms to make it actually successful. I'm sorry, it's getting late here, and I'm losing my words apparently.
No, it's all good. And I think our friend Izar Tarandash is the one who originally quoted or came up with pushed reasonable,
Okay.
and then I attached myself to the project and started using it. I probably use it more than he does now, but he was the one that I heard say it first. So I want to interact with both of these questions, but I want to start with a question that we have from Katya here. What are your best tips for building threat modeling into the product engineering process? And then what are the key enablers to succeed with it, especially for threat modeling for privacy, which may be less known? So I know you've both had a lot of experience from this perspective. And so I'm curious to see what are some of the things that you would put forth, starting off as like, what are tips for building threat modeling into the product engineering process? Kim, you want to give us some thoughts on this one first?
I think my getting started tip would be start small. Don't go for the big, full-fledged, heavy threat modeling process, or having that I don't know, that tool that has a lot of guidance, but is maybe not the stuff that is not doing it the way that you want it to do. So I think the most important thing is to start small, figure out how it works for you, what you need. Do you want, I don't know, do you want a report? Do you want it to be closely I'm really struggling today. I'm sorry. Do you want it to be more embedded in the development lifecycle and talk with the developers more closely? What do you need in your organization? And then you can expand on that and grow and find some tools, which I know some people here in this webinar can help you with. So I think the important thing is to not get too caught up in, let's use this big threat modeling framework that I know my friend at another organization has been using. Just figure out what works for you and start small.
Yeah. Okay. So Matt, what would you add on top of that?
So I agree with what Kim is saying. I think it's important maybe that you get opinions from. There are others who have done this before, and there's a body of knowledge available to help, right? So I don't know. I suppose I can plug the threat modeling capabilities as one opportunity here. Part of the threat modeling manifesto, the group that we created a set of capabilities that to look for when it comes to building out a threat modeling practice. And whether you're doing threat modeling for privacy or you're doing a threat modeling for security, the things that you might aspire to, right? What capabilities do you need in your threat modeling process to be successful? So that can help you build out a roadmap where you start small. You start with a pilot program, you demonstrate success, you show value, and then you scale that out to the rest. There are other papers available from other organizations that we could probably provide links to as well, or that are linked from the capabilities page on threatmoningmanifesto.org. And so that's probably the best thing. And I guess it's important we talk about threat modeling as a practice and independent of whether it's security or privacy. But there are some things that come in with privacy, I think, just in a little bit of learning that I've done and talking to Kim extensively on this, that with security, you do need to have you should have your engineers, and you should have documentation and QA and other folks within the expanded engineering organization be part of that discussion, right? Because threat modeling is both a security analysis activity, but also it's an information sharing exercise. When it comes to privacy, the extent of the individuals you probably need or the roles that you need in that conversation go well beyond what you need for security, right? You probably need lawyers, you probably need data scientists, you probably need people who work with third-party integrations, right? There are things that happen in a privacy space that are important, and you need security to be represented, but isn't necessarily the core there. So your whatever process you implement for threat modeling needs to keep in mind the roles and responsibilities that people will have, and making sure that the right people are connected to the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. So the next question is in regards to zero trust, and so I'm gonna show a threat model because as you both know, I spent a lot of time last year researching zero trust, and so the question about as we move towards zero trust architecture, do we see this as a barrier to secure by design when threat modeling is moving away from boundary and perimeter protections? And so let me
I
show
still
you
want to
just
tackle this, but go ahead, Chris. Bring up this threat
let me
model.
just show let me show this threat model that I did that I did some research. I did extensive research last year into zero trust, and I really wanted to understand it myself. I found that I saw lots of people talking about it, but I didn't really understand. So you can go look up my talk on it's on YouTube from a couple different conferences, zero trust threat modeling. But this is I'm just showing this inside of the Davichi platform as well, so people can see what we do at Davichi. But when you think about zero trust and you think about these various different trust boundaries, one of the things that I realized in the research I did last year is with zero trust, the trust boundaries are just different. It's no longer just an outside inside. And Google said that in the Beyond Corp document, the first, before it was even called zero trust, they came out and said it. It's the outside and the inside. There's just no longer that demarcation point. Yes, we do want to still use various segments of the network and try to protect them as best we can. But in a zero trust world, you've got control plane, which I'm showing at the top with the policy engine, the policy administrator. You got data plane, which is your PEP or your policy enforcement point. And then you've got various enclaves behind the policy enforcement point where you're delivering services. And you've got SIM, you've got CDM, PKI, identity management, all of these things rolling together. And so from my perspective, yes, there are threat modeling has a lot of differences when we start thinking about zero trust. The core is still the same, but there are some different things that come into play here. But I think secure by design is still, I apply secure by design the same way that I do for zero trust as I do for web apps, as I do for mobile apps, because secure by design and private by design, it's really just using this type of a process where we're thinking about like what are the patterns that we want to reflect, and then using threat modeling as a vehicle to unlock what are the challenges, what are the things that we need to mitigate. All of that still, for me, is an agnostic solution. It isn't tied to any given stack, just like threat modeling can be applied to anything.
Yeah.
But I'm
Yeah.
curious, what do y'all think about this?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah. So I haven't looked into it that closely. So maybe my interpretation is a bit naive, but to me, zero trust is kind of like a paranoid version of threat modeling. Like, I mean, you just have more trust boundaries or are more protective of everything. So I don't think that there's some inherent difference. It's just being more careful about the assumptions you make. But well, correct me if I'm wrong, if I interpret the concept wrongly. So
No, you got it right, Kim. I think so two parts. First off, LinkedIn LinkedIn user, we don't know who it was, it's an anonymous question. Is zero trust a barrier to secure by design? No. It's a requirement in zero trust.
Yes.
You must have secure by design. And you're basing your security, you're basing that trust. Zero trust doesn't mean zero trust doesn't mean there is no trust. It's just that you don't start from a trustworthy position. And
Yep.
and so the first part is secure by design must occur, and therefore it isn't a barrier to secure by design. It reinforces secure by design, number one. Number two, and this has sort of been a evolving thing for me, at least over the past 15 years, whatever, doing threat modeling. We may have done ourselves a disservice in the engineering world by having trust boundaries in the first place that were as expansive as they were, right? So we look at doing things like input validation and output sanitization on a web server or on a database server or on intermediate, N-tier architecture, intermediate servers. If you do it in all the various places and they're all within one, sorry, let me take that back. If you do it correctly, you do it at each layer where you have input coming in, you do input validation, you do output sanitization, and data that goes through the system gets properly vetted, validated, and checked. And if instead you had drawn a single boundary around your entire N-tier architecture and said everything that comes in I have to trust, and everything that goes out I have to sanitize, and I don't do anything in the middle, you're doing it wrong, probably. And so we may have done ourselves a disservice by having expansive trust boundaries in the first place. In fact, when I have done threat modeling, over the years, I almost ignore trust boundaries. I use them as containers more so than groupings, more so than actual indicators that we don't. As soon as stuff comes into the boundary, we don't do anything with it because we trust it.
Yeah.
But in zero trust, you can't. The trust boundary is the thing that you're building. And the secure design principle is you do validation at every point in the process anyway.
Yeah. And as we see, there's, we did uncover lots of different threats that impact the zero trust architecture there. So yeah, I'm glad we got a chance to look at that because I spent a lot of time doing that research last year, and I learned a lot along the way. But so I guess we're kind of coming towards the end of our time here. If somebody wants to sneak another question in, feel free. But if not, I guess what's some advice that you would leave our audience with here as we prepare to wrap up this conversation? Like, where do we get started with secure by design and private by design? Well, what's the first step?
Education. Get familiar with the concepts, right? Yes,
Okay.
there's some academics involved here. Kim knows this better than I think the rest of us here. Their years of experience in the academic world, and the solid research that her and her teams have worked on. But you have to be knowledgeable, right? And then that knowledge should be tied to the technologies that you're using. Understand what properties your technologies have, and understand what those threats are that come from them, right? So practical research, practical information resources, things like CWE, the Common Weakness Enumeration, common attack patterns, the MITRE attack framework. Sorry, Kim, privacy design tactics, but it's not that.
Strategies.
Thank you.
Yeah. But
So-
the strategies have tactics, so yeah.
But matching them to your technology, right? If you're using C versus Go versus Rust, you have a different set of threats that you have to worry about, different set of security properties and principles that you need to understand and know. And it's with that that allows you then to do the critical analysis and to bake things in upfront and avoid, right? Avoidance of risk, not acceptance of risk. I think that for me, that's the biggest thing is the education, the knowledge, and making it in context with what you're building. And that's maybe where guardrails comes in, right? Whether it's you build that knowledge or that your organization builds that knowledge, it's key to have.
Yeah. Kim, what do you think?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, I completely agree. I think to do it right, to do it properly, you will need to invest a lot of time in getting the background, getting the foundation, the foundational knowledge. But on the other hand, I do not want to scare the audience and saying like, let's first get everybody, let's get a PhD on security and privacy before you can get started. I think you can really start more lightweight, and for privacy, for instance, just include one question whenever you build a new feature or something, which is, do I really need all the data? I mean, there's already some small steps you can take, and you can evolve into that more heavyweight stuff that will make it more successful or more strong. But so don't let it scare you. You can start small, you can start lightweight, and you can evolve together with your skills, with your team, and build that knowledge.
Yeah, I'm glad you both enlightened me, because I thought the option was going to be to go sign the pledge. Oh, well, hey, just leave that out there for you. I'll leave that for another day to unpack what that means. But you can look up the CISA Secure by Design pledge and read all about it. And you can even listen to various podcasters describe it. So it's been an honor.
You had to get that in there, didn't you?
I had to get a dig in there. Come on. It's been an honor to have Matt and Kim with us. And I just want to say, Davichi, we're putting these on. We're trying to bring more knowledge to the industry. But if you're in the market for a threat modeling tool, we have a free forever plan. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is, how do we bring threat modeling to the masses? And you don't even have to give us any money. There's a free forever plan. You can do 3 threat models inside of the Davichi platform that are free forever. So you can just work on them and continue using the tool, because I want to see more people threat model. And I think we all are going to agree about that. The more threat modeling we get happening in the world, the better we're going to be at secure by design, private by design. There's going to be less things to find downfield, downstream, if we start doing this up front. So check out the Davichi platform, davichi.com. There's a link right there. It'll take you to make a free forever account. Get in there and start threat modeling. I mean, what do you got to lose? It doesn't cost you anything. Dr. Vutz, Matt Coles, thank you so much for being a part of this event with us. And just love any chance I get to interact with both of you. You're both brilliant. So I love to learn from you. And that's what I just did here. I got a little course in privacy engineering and some secure by design flavor. So you're both awesome. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Chris, for having us.
Thank you.